All right, let's jump right in. We're about to go on an adventure inside what might be the most complex and powerful things we've ever built: large AI models. Now, for most of us, they're a total black box, right? You put something in, you get something out, but what on earth happens in the middle? Well, today we're going to pry that box open. And this right here is exactly why this matters so much. This quote just cuts straight to the heart of the problem. We're building these incredible systems that develop abilities that can surprise even the people who made them, and sometimes not in a good way. So understanding them isn't just some academic exercise, it's absolutely critical. Which brings us to the big question for this whole explainer. If you can't just ask an AI what it's thinking, how in the world do you start to map its internal landscape? How do you find the ghost in the machine? So the big problem we're up against is what researchers call opaque intelligence. We've got AIs that can write poetry, that can figure out the shape of proteins, even pass medical exams, but we have no clear blueprint for how they're actually reasoning. And that lack of transparency, that opacity, makes it incredibly hard to trust that they're safe or fair or even telling the truth. To solve this, we kind of need a whole new mindset. Think about it like this. Imagine we've been handed this piece of bafflingly advanced alien technology. We can't just be the drivers anymore. We have to become its mechanics and its neuroscientists. We have to be willing to take it apart piece by piece just to figure out how it actually ticks. The good news is there's a new scientific field called mechanistic interpretability that's doing exactly that. It's pioneering this whole process of reverse engineering these artificial minds and trying to turn that black box into something that looks more like a detailed schematic we can actually read. And this whole reverse engineering process really boils down to three key stages. First, you have to decompose the huge, tangled mess of the network into smaller, simpler parts. Second, you figure out what those parts are actually doing, and this is the really important bit. You validate that you're right. And then the ultimate goal, the real holy grail, you use that understanding to forecast what the model is going to do next, especially in situations it's never seen before. But okay, right away you hit this massive roadblock. The most obvious place to look, a single neuron, turns out to be a really bad place to start. And that's because of something called polysemanticity. See, a single neuron in an AI might fire when it sees a cat face, but it also might fire for the front of a car, or maybe for a line of HTML code. It's this confusing jumble of totally unrelated ideas, which makes looking at just one neuron pretty much useless. And here's the wild reason why that happens. Our brains, we tend to group information into neat little boxes, into distinct concepts. But AI models, they use this totally different strategy called superposition. They can represent way more features than they actually have neurons by packing them all together in this super compressed, overlapping way. Think of it like the difference between using a simple memory trick to remember a few items for a test versus zipping up thousands of different files into a single, tiny, compressed folder. So how do you unzip that folder? Well, the breakthrough tool here is something called a sparse autoencoder, or an SAE. You can think of it like this. The AI's internal representation is like one giant, dense paragraph where thousands of ideas are all smashed together. A sparse autoencoder is like this magical decoder that goes in, untangles that whole mess, and creates a clean dictionary where every single idea, like DNA sequences or scam emails, gets its own clear, separate entry. And you've got to remember, this process isn't just a straight line. It's not a one-and-done thing. It's this constant loop of discovery. You decompose the network to find these features, you describe what you think they're doing, and then you run experiments to validate if you're right. And if you're wrong, you just tweak your idea and you go again, getting a little bit closer to the truth with every single cycle. Okay, so now we can find these features, but that brings us to the next absolutely crucial step. I mean, it's one thing to find a feature that seems to light up whenever the AI sees a DNA sequence, but proving that that feature is what the model actually uses to think about DNA, that is the giant leap from just seeing a correlation to proving causation. And that's where this gets really powerful. To put it as simply as possible, we have to prove these features aren't just passive bystanders. They are the actual causal levers inside the model. They're the gears, the circuits, that are really driving its decisions and making it behave the way it does. And there is this brilliant experiment that shows you exactly how they do it. Researchers took a model that was trained to play the game Othello, and they found it had developed its own internal map of the game board. So they performed a kind of digital brain surgery. They went right into the model's activations and manually flipped the feature for one square on the board, from white to black. And what happened? Instantly, the model's prediction for the best next move completely changed. That was the proof that its internal map was causally driving its strategy. And that, right there, is the payoff. By finding and validating these causal features, we can start to map the real circuits of thought inside an AI. It's almost like being able to monitor the specific brain signals that fire right before a reflex happens. If you have a detailed enough map, you could predict what the model is going to do before it even does it. Now, it's really important to be clear about this. This is a very young science. We are right at the beginning of this journey, and the road ahead is packed with some enormous challenges. I mean, the open problems are huge. The tools we have now, like those sparse autoencoders, they still have technical glitches. Trying to scale these methods up to work on the truly massive frontier models, that's a monumental engineering task. And maybe the biggest challenge of all is that we're so early in this whole game, we're still figuring out what the right questions are to even ask these alien minds. This gives you a little taste of the scale of that challenge. Just figuring out the role of one single component, that little blue dot there, means you have to untangle its relationship with this huge, complex web of other connections. Now, imagine trying to do that for tens of thousands of features inside a model with trillions of moving parts. It's a lot. But here's the best way to think about all these challenges. We're not just using tools that already exist. We are literally in the process of inventing a brand new type of scientific instrument. It's like we're building the first microscope that's powerful enough to finally see the fundamental particles of artificial thought. And that brings us to what's ultimately at stake here. Because if we can actually pull this off, it's not just going to make AI safer. It could completely change our understanding of what intelligence even is. So on a practical level, getting this right means we can actually audit AIs for dangerous behaviors like deception, and we can build systems that are way more robust and controllable. But the scientific implications, they're even bigger. By studying these artificial minds with a kind of access we could never, ever have with a human brain, we might just unlock brand new discoveries about learning, cognition, and the very nature of thought itself. And that leaves us with this final kind of fascinating question. For the first time in human history, we've created other minds. If we can actually learn to read them, to decode the basic grammar of how they think, what reflections of our own intelligence are we going to find in there? And what will we discover that's entirely new?